The weather-beaten trail wound ahead into the dust-racked climes of the barren land which dominates large portions of the Norgolian Empire. Age-worn hoofprints smothered by the sifting sands of time shone dully against the dust-splattered crust of earth. The tireless sun cast its parching rays of incandescence from overhead, halfway through its daily revolution. Small rodents scampered about, occupying themselves in the daily accomplishment of their dismal lives. Dust sprayed over 3 heaving mounts in blinding clouds, while they bore their burdensome cargoes of their struggling overseers. "Prepare to embrace your creators in the Stygian haunts of hell, barbarian," gasped the first soldier. "Only after you have kissed the fleeting steed of death, wretch," returned Grigner. A sweeping blade of flashing steel riveted from the massive barbarian's hide-enameled shield as his rippling right arm thrust forth, sending a steel-shod blade to the hilt into the soldier's vital organs. The disemboweled mercenary crumpled from his saddle and sank to the clouded sward, sprinkling the parched dust with crimson droplets of escaping life fluid. The enthused barbarian swiveled about, his shock of fiery red hair tossing robustly in the humid air currents as he faced the attack of the defeated soldier's fellow in arms. "Damn you, barbarian!" shrieked the soldier as he observed his comrade in death. A gleaming scimitar smote a heavy blow against the renegade's spiked helmet, bringing a heavy cloud over the accordion's misting brain. Shaking off the effects of the pounding blow to his head, Grigner brought down his scarlet-streaked edge against the soldier's crudely forged hauberk, clanging helplessly to the left side of his opponent. The soldier's steed whinnied as he directed the horse back from the driving blade of the barbarian. Grigner leashed his mount forward as the hoarsely piercing battle cry of the wilderness-bred race resounded from his grinding lungs. A twirling blade bounced harmlessly from the mighty thief's buckler as his rolling right arm cleft upward, sending a foot of blinding steel ripping through the Cimmerine's exposed gullet. A gasping gurgle from the soldier's writhing mouth as he tumbled to the golden stand at his feet and wormed agonizingly in his deathbed. Grigner's emerald green orbs glared lustfully at the wallowing soldier struggling before his... Oh, God. That is the best description right there. Glared lustfully at a wallowing soldier. Ugh. Grigner's emerald green orbs glared lustfully at the wallowing soldier struggling before his chestnut-swirled mount. His scowling voice reverberated over the dying form in a tone of mocking mirth. "You city-bred dogs should learn not to antagonize your better." Reining his weary mount ahead, Grigner resumed his journey to the Norgolian city of Gorzum, hoping to discover wine, women, and adventure to boil the wild blood coursing through his savage veins. The trek to Gorzum was forced upon Grigner when the soldiers of Krynn were leashed upon him by a faithless concubine he had wooed. His scandalous activities throughout the Cimmerian city had unleashed throngs of havoc and uproar amongst its refined patricians, leading them to tack a heavy reward over his head. He had barely managed to escape through the back entrance of the inn he had been guzzling in. Okay. Great descriptors here. He had barely managed to escape through the back entrance of the inn he had been guzzling in as a squad of soldiers pounced upon him. After spilling a spout of blood from the leader of the mercenaries as he dismembered one of the officer's arms, he retreated to his mount to make his way towards Gorzum, rumored to contain hoards of plunder and many young wenches for any man who has the backbone to wrest them away. Chapter 2. Arriving after dusk in Gorzum, Grignr descended down a dismal alley, reining his horse before a beaten tavern. The red-haired giant strode into the dimly lit hostelry, reeking of foul odors and cheap wine. The air was heavy with choking fumes, spewing from the smoldering torches encased within Thedan's earthen-packed walls. Tables were clustered with groups of drunken thieves and cutthroats tossing dice while making love to willing prostitutes, just like right there. Eyeing a slender female crouched alone at a nearby bench, Grignr advanced, wishing to wholesomely occupy his time. Yeah, wholesomely. Wholesome. The flickering torches cast weird shafts of luminous dancing over the half-naked harlot of his choice. Her stringy orchid twines of hair swaying gracefully over the lithe, opaque nose. Yes, because lithe, that's exactly the best descriptor for her nose, is lithe. As she raised a half-drained mug to her pale red lips. Glancing upward, the alluring complexion noted the stalwart giant as he rapidly approached. A faint glimmer sparked from the pair of deep blue ovals of the amorous female as she motioned toward Grignr, enticing him to join her. The barbarian seated himself upon a stool at the wench's side, exposing his body naked, save for a loincloth brandishing a long steel broadsword, an iron spiral battle helmet, and a thick leather sandals to her unobstructed view. "Thou hast need to occupy your time, barbarian," questioned the female in sudden weird Shakespearean voice. "Only if something worth offering is within my reach," stated Grignr as his hands crept to embrace the tempting female, who welcomed them with open willingness. "From where do you come, barbarian, and by what are you called?" gasped the complying wench, her Shakespearean dialogue suddenly vanishing, as Grignr smothered her lips with the blazing touch of his flaming mouth, which you would think would burn her, come to think of it. The engrossing titan ignored the queries of the inquisitive female, pulling her towards him and crushing her sagging nipples to his yearning chest. Oh boy, that's appealing descriptor right there, obviously. Without struggle, she gave in, winding her soft arms around the harshly bronzed hide of Grignr, corded shoulder blades as his calloused hands caressed her firm, protruding bust. She has more than one bust? Okay. Are we sure Grignar's like, it seems to me that he might be fondling an eldritch abomination, not a woman, but okay, we'll keep going. "You make love well, wench," admitted Grignr as he reached for the vessel of potent wine his charge had been quaffing. Quaffing? Is that a word? The story needs to ban its thesaurus. A flying foot caught the mug Grignr had taken hold of, sending its blood-red contents sloshing over a flickering crescent, leashing tongues of bright orange flame to the foot-trodden floor. Just a narrator's note here. What just happened? "Remove yourself, sirrah. The wench belongs to me," babbled a drunken soldier, too far consumed by the influences of his virile brew to take note of the superior size of his adversary. Grignr lively bounded from the startled female, his face lit up to an ashen-red ferocity, and eyes locked in a searing, feral blaze towards the swaying soldier. "To hell with you, braggart!" bellowed the angered Echoordian, as he hefted his finely honed broadsword. The staggering soldier clumsily reached towards the pommel of his dangling sword, but before his hands ever touched the oaken hilt, a silvered flash was slicing the heavy air. The thews of the savage's lashing right arm bulged from the glistening bronzed hide at his blade bit deeply into the soldier's neck, lopping off the confused heads of his senseless tormentor. With a nauseating thud, the sever oval toppled to the floor as the segregated torso of Grignor's bovine antagonist swayed, then collapsed in a pool of swirled crimson. In the confusion, the soldiers' fellows confronted Grignard with unsheathed cutlasses directed towards the latter's scowling makeup. "The slut should have picked his quarry more carefully," roared the victor in a mocking baritone growl as he wiped his dripping blade on the prostrate form and returned it to his scabbard. "The fool should have shown more prudence. However, you shall rue your actions while rotting in the pits," stated one of the sprawled soldier's comrades. Grignor's hand began to remove his blade from its leather housing, but retarded the motion in face of the blades waving before his face. "Dismiss your hand from the hilt, barbarian, or you shall find a foot of steel sheathed in your gizzard." Grignard waved his position, observing his plight, whereupon he took the soldier's advice as the only logical choice for some reason. To attempt to hack his way from his present predicament could only warrant certain death, says the person who just killed like 4 or 5 soldiers just a chapter ago, but okay. He was of no mind to bring upon his own demise if an alternate path presented itself. The will to necessitate his life forced him to yield to the superior force in hopes of a moment of carelessness later upon the part of his captors in which he could effect a more plausible means of escape. "You may steady your arms. I will go without a struggle." "Your decision is a wise one, yet perhaps you would have been better off had you forced death." The soldier's mouth wrinkled into a sadistic grin of knowing mirth as he prodded his prisoner's arm with his sword point. After an indiscriminate period of marching through the slinking alleyways and dim moonlit streets, the procession confronted a massive After an indiscriminate period of marching through slinking alleyways and dim mood-lighted streets, the procession confronted a massive Sarajevo. The palace area was surrounded by an iron grating with a lush garden upon all sides. The group was admitted through the gilded gateway, and Grignard was led along a stone pathway bordered by plush vegetation, lustfully enhanced by the moon's shimmering rays. God, what is it with this story lustfully anyways? Good Lord. Upon reaching the palace, the group was granted entrance, and after several minutes of explanation, led through several winding corridors to a richly draped chamber. Confronting the group was a short, stocky man seated upon a golden throne. Tapestries of richly draped regal blue silk covered all walls of the chamber, while the steps leading to the throne were plated with sparkling white ivory. Ivory sparkles in this universe, apparently. The man upon the throne had a naked wench seated at each of his arms and trusted advisor seated in back of him. At each corner of the chamber, a guard stood at attention with upraised pikes supported in their hands, golden chainmail adoring their torsos, and barred helmets emitting scarlet plumes and shrouding their heads. The man rose from his throne to the dais surrounding it. His plush turquoise robe dangled loosely from his Kanuki frame. The soldiers surrounding Grignard fell to their knees with heads bowed to the stone masonry of the floor in fearful dignity of their sovereign liege. "Explain the purpose of this intrusion upon my chateau." In a world where there is no... Okay, so there's chateaus now. Okay, so there are chateaus in this planet. Boy, this is a really weird universe. "Your Cyanidity, resplendent in noble grandeur, we have brought this yokel before you." The soldier gestured towards Grignard. "For the redress of your all-knowing wisdom in judgment regarding his fate. Down on your knees, lout, and pray proper homage to your sovereign, commanded the pudgy noble of Grigner.
By the soly beard of Mirfric, Grigner kneels to no man,
growled the massive barbarian as he remembered that line from The Witcher 3. You dare to deal this blasphemous act to me? You are indeed brave, stranger, yet your valor smacks of foolishness.
I find you to be the only fool sitting upon your pompous throne, enhancing the rolling flabs of your belly in the midst of your elaborate luxury, and
the soldier standing at Grignar's side smote him heavily in the face with the flat of his sword, cutting short the harsh words and knocking the battered helmet to the masonry with an echoing clang. The paunchy noble's sagging round face flushed, suddenly pale, then hastily lit up to a lustrous cherry-red radiance. His lips trembled with malicious rage, while emitting a muffled, sibilant gibberish. His sagging flabs rolled like a tub of upset jelly, then compressed as he sucked in his gut in an attempt to conceal his softness. God. The prince regained his statue just as the narrator managed to stop cracking up, then spoke to the soldiers surrounding Grigner, his face conforming to an ugly expression of sadistic humor. Take this uncouth heathen to the vault of misery, and be sure that his agonies are long and drawn out before death can release him.
As you wish, sire. Your command shall be heeded immediately,
answered the soldier on the right of Grigner, as he stared into the barbarian's seemingly unaffected face. The advisor seated in the back of the noble slowly rose and advanced to the side of his master, motioning the witches seated at his sides to remove themselves. He lowered his head and whispered to the noble,
Eminence, the punishment you have decreed will cause much misery to this scum, yet it will only last a short time. Then release him to a land beyond the sufferings of the human body. Why not mellow him in one of the subterranean vaults for a few days, then send him to a life of labor in one of your buried mines? To one such as he, a life spent in confinement of the Stygian pits will be an infinitely more appropriate and lasting torture.
The noble cupped his drooping double chin in the folds of his brimming palm, meditating for a moment upon the rationality of the counselor's words, then raised his shaggy brown eyebrows and turned towards the advisor, eyes aglow. As always, Agamfunt, you speak great wisdom. Your words ring of great knowledge concerning the nature of one such as he, saith the king. The noble turned to the prisoner with a noticeable shimmer reflecting in his frog-like eyes, and his lips contorting to a greasy grin. I have decided to void my previous decree. The prisoner shall be removed to one of the palace's underground vaults. There he shall stay until I have decided that he is sufficiently simmered, whereupon he is to be allowed to spend the remainder of his days at labor in one of my mines. Upon hearing this, Grigner realized that his fate would be far less merciful than death to one such as he, who is used to roaming the countryside at will. A life of confinement would be more than his body and mind could stand up to. This type of life would be immeasurably worse than death.
I shall never understand the ways of your twisted civilization. I simply defend my honor and am condemned to a life of confinement by a pig who sits on his royal ass wooing whores and who knows nothing of the affairs of the land he imagines to rule.
Lectures Grigner? Enough of this. Away with the slut before I lose my control. Seeing the peril of his position, Grignar searched for an opening. Crushing prudence to the sword, he plowed into the soldier at his left arm, taking hold of his sword and bounding to the dais supporting the prince before the startled guards could regain their composure. Agafant leaped Grignar and his squire, but found a sword blade permeating the length of his ribs before he could loose his weapon. The counselor slumped to his knees as Grignor slimmed his crimson blade from Agamemnon's rib cage. The fat prince stood, undulating in insurmountable fear before the edge of the fiery manned comet, his flabs of jelly blubber pulsating to and fro in ripples of flowing terror. Oh, good God, I got to the end of that sentence. I'm so proud of myself. As I undulate in uncontrollable laughter at the ridiculousness of that sentence.
Where is your wisdom and power now, your majesty?
Growled Grignor. The prince went rigid as Grignor discerned him glazing over his shoulder. He swiveled to note the cause of the noble's attention, raised his sword over his head, and prepared to leash a vicious downward cleft, but fell short as the haft of a steel-rimmed pike crashed against his unguarded skull. Then blackness and solitude, silence enshrouding an ever-peaceful, reigned supreme. Before me, sirrah, before me, as always, ha, 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 nobly cackled. This reading of The Eye of Argon by Jim Theus is brought to you by my sanity, which is gone now.